Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
Well, welcome to End of Dragons Daily. I think we're on part 109 at the moment. It's been kind of tricky since I took the numbering out of the titles. If you notice that it's now actually hidden on the track bar, like I'm listing out the episode count as a chapter header, and I think that's cool. And you know, a lot of you guys gave that advice, said, oh, take the number out of the title and so on, but it means that I'm losing a little bit of track, especially considering, as you guys have seen, there hasn't been a video for a week. In fact, I've hardly played any Guild Wars 2 this past week at all. I feel like it's a good time to take a bit of a breather right after the first Elite Spec beta stuff. Looking at the length of those videos and the streams I did as well, I think it's been a really good technique to avoid burnout here. I actually had an IRL trip on one of those days too, which was very fun. But the End of Dragons press does roll on, and so there is plenty to talk about, lots to catch up on. So today we're going to do a bit of a shorter show, get it back into the swing of things. I do have some comments from you all, and I want to open the floor to some of these new topics of the other things that have just occurred. Starting with today, it's not really an End of Dragons thing necessarily, but there was a big patch, the next part of the Living World replay, and 2 festivals at once. Both the Crown Pavilion and the Festival of the Four Winds, as far as I understand, which is kind of interesting to me. It feels very Living World Season 1-y, where, you know, the two came in immediately back-to-back on one another. Wasn't there a little bit of overlap, maybe, at some point? Or maybe was it the year after Season 1 that had happened? The patch wasn't really a balance patch, but it did have some pre-stacking changes, like taking away, you know, pre-stacking, then Elite Spec swap, and then move in to go execute your fight, which, on the face of it, I actually really think smart for future-proofing the game and expanding the kind of things they can do with later Elite Specs and cleaning up the build templates and so on. But I guess some people who currently use those techniques and think that somehow represents skill cap don't like, so I guess that's a little bit of the discussion on today's patch. Now, one of the big things I kind of want to do a video on maybe host an End of Dragons Daily on, is a roadmap. So there was another roadmap over on the official website. Those are usually pretty exciting. The thing is, I think it's entirely information we already knew. It's just we kind of get more tangible dates on stuff. So the next Elite Spec beta, the Return to Living World Season 4 and Icebrood Saga dates, and then Alliances and DirectX 11, but they both have dates now. So it's September the 21st for DirectX 11, and it's September the 24th for the first beta for the new World vs. World Alliance stuff. Quite interestingly as well, on the roadmap post, they do talk about how today's patch will silently in the background put some of this stuff in that's necessary for the World vs. World stuff. So we get dates for that. It basically sounds like the back half of September is when more exciting stuff's coming up, and the rest of it we kind of already had a good sense of. With the Living World replay and all the festivals and these new initiatives, there really is a lot happening with the game. So there's a lot in the roadmap. I'll have a link in the description for those of you who are curious, but we kind of have already covered a lot of it. Last but not least, and over to End of Dragons specifically, there are 2 big topics, really. One of which I'll do a video on tomorrow, the other the day after that, I guess. So first is they did do a trailer for Skiffs. Now, as I speak to you guys today, I haven't actually seen it yet, but I assume it's got some meaty stuff in there. I can see it's got 100,000 views on YouTube. I think that'll be a really fun thing for the next part of End of Dragons Daily. I guess it's just on Skiffs and demoing those. I guess it doesn't also cover fishing. It's also only like a minute long, so it doesn't exactly, you know, I'm not expecting it to give up many mechanical details, but maybe we can pick at some things in the background. So we will be covering that. And secondly, in the roadmap post, they hid the next Elite Spec icon, which people, of course, saw, and then they tweeted this, you can see on screen, of it colored in. So we'll be talking about who this is. You guys can put your predictions down below if you like. I already have mine. Now, my question to you guys is, did I miss anything? They didn't also confirm a stream, did they? I mean, a part of me feels like maybe they did, which talks a bit more about the Skiffs. If they did, then obviously we'll be looking at that in due time. So if I missed any big topics, let me know them down below and we'll start rolling this stuff out. I've noticed that because we spent so long on the Elite Specs and the Elite Spec speculation and, you know, the beta reviews and so on and so on and so on, our time for normal Q&A back and forth about the X-Pack has gone, like, way down. It's been totally drowned out. So let's end out today's video with some messages here. Now, I kind of had to do some digging, again, because it's mostly just elite spec guesses and stuff that we've had lately. So going a little bit back on some of these, some random recent videos. First, we have Nathaniel Cook, who says, "Hey WP, where do you envision live support headed after the release of End of Dragons? After the Icebreed Saga, are we done with Living World? Depending on the success of the expansion, will ArenaNet move to traditional box expansion release model with only light current events in between?" Well, so you've kind of got two things here. Ending Living World, and then the idea of what you would replace it with. The fact that they called the Icebreed Saga kind of says to me that they don't like the brand of Living World, that they want to move on from it. Otherwise, you know, why would they have tried to present the Icebreed Saga as some big new initiative? It's a weird one with Guild Wars 2 because it feels like ever since Living World Season 1 got greenlit, we've been eternally in this place where it's like, do they like expansions or not? And then eventually we get one, and it feels like, oh good, we're finally going to be getting regular boxes, and then they go back to Living World, and it feels like they just want to defund everything else and keep it on Living World, with the Icebreed Saga kind of being like the big apex moment for that. So I want to sit here and say to you, no, they'll do regular boxes. Regular boxes is the smart thing. This is what galvanizes the community the most. This is what excites people. But what do I know, really? I mean, maybe there'll be another saga. I think that would be such a disaster to have, like, the Cantha Saga get announced after this. It does, I don't know whether it worries me, but I do find it curious that there's been absolutely no mention of post-release support. There was kind of that more recent confirmation that they are continuing with Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 is the game that matters. They're not trying to move on. You know, they're doing the DirectX 11 update later on in September. There are big long-term plans with it. But then we don't actually really hear what form those plans take. Of course, I want to hear its boxes. And so let's go to your proposal. They do expansions regularly with light current events in between. Are current events enough? I mean, this is another weird big thing for... Well, first of all, I would just like to say, one thing they confirmed is the strike missions, the hard strike missions, the raid equivalent stuff, that's getting trickled in post-release. So that is one thing we've heard that will be going on after the Icebreed Saga. They clearly don't have difficult strikes ready for the expansion's launch itself. They're getting staggered out afterwards. And we see other MMOs use that technique, and I'm sure that that's why ArenaNet's going for that. So we'll see that. That's already bigger than current events in my estimation. For players who actually want to engage with that kind of content, that is, if they are of an adequate tuning, such that people take a long time to beat them and have exciting rewards, that's definitely way better than current events. But let's say for everyone who doesn't like that kind of content and is just kind of a baseline thing, are current events enough? I don't know. I mean, some of the current events actually got kind of big and kind of interesting, like the Riftmaker one, where we're actually going to these mini realities to fight specific bosses, and then we get plunked back out. Maybe they can get away with that. If they do that, though, what I think ArenaNet really needs to do is confirm, like, straight away, maybe even before End of Dragons comes out, yeah, there are more expansions. Like, I would probably tolerate a lot of stuff if they said straight away, okay, there's not just one more expansion after End of Dragons. Guys, we are greenlighting 2 expansions for after End of Dragons already, and guess what? Here's the name for the next one. It's going End of Dragons, and then it's going, to use an old favorite, Cogs of War straight away after that. If there's that confirmation straight, and they don't need to do any details, there doesn't need to be like any concept art, there doesn't need to be a logo or anything, but just like that confirmation, I think people would be pretty happy to sit about with current events. And here's the final weird wriggle with Guild Wars as well. And I don't know whether it's something ArenaNet should embrace or not. For my entire time playing the game and covering the game, I haven't wanted to embrace this because I don't think it's smart to embrace. But there is kind of this thing where people look at it as a casual game, as a game that's not worth playing unless there's a box. People already are in that situation. They say, well, look, there's no subscription fee, so screw it, I don't really care about focusing on it. And so the devs seeing that could maybe just say, all right, fine. We're not going to do a carrot on a stick. We're not going to do gear treadmills. We're not going to do sub fees. We are fundamentally a game where it's okay to walk away from. And for that reason, why are we messing about with Living World? Let's just do current events. Like, I can see that as a logical progression. That probably kills their gem store sales, and I don't think it's something they would ever say, like, publicly because of that. But maybe just following where the fundamental philosophies of this franchise lead them is the healthiest place to go. And I think that would therefore mean, yeah, very light patches and expansions every 2 years or so. I mean, every 2 years, as long as you know that's on the horizon, maybe it's okay. Maybe. I'm not saying I have the answers. I think it's actually very, very, very tricky. Speaking of strikes, here we got William Hawkins, who says, if raids are going to be replaced by strikes, should players be able to earn their legendary armor through strikes? Also, for new players, what should your first set or 2 sets of ascended armor should you get? Or this is actually a kind of a big topic. I know some of you guys might be rolling your eyes and sick of this topic and, you know, find it uninteresting. But I think this is a really important thing that the devs need to think about when it comes to strikes. And that's that there has to be good rewards for them. You can look at a lot of reasons why strikes failed in the Icebreed Saga. Their fear of actually introducing and showing them to the regular player base as a matter of course of going through the story patch. The inadequate tuning of them. To this day, even some of the more sophisticated and interesting strikes are tuned really wonkily. Like, you look at the Whisper of Jormag strike, it's got a cool phase where you go into like some other ethereal mist world for a while and you have to fight your own doppelganger. That's a really cool thing, and it's all implemented, except it's so easy, it's like a forgettable non-part of the fight, right? When if that had better tuning, it could be, you know, kind of a marionette style experience almost. By that I mean everyone's reliant on the success of each other and you feel like everyone has to pull their own weight. And finally, beyond the tuning, there's the matter of rewards. Like, when I think of the strikes and I think of the convoluted chest mechanic and the weekly resets and the cape shards and the bone skinner special crafting stuff, was any of that really coherent? Did any of that really create a lot of appetite for people? Maybe the cape did a bit before they started selling hundreds of them on the gem store. They have to figure something out for this. Personally, I think all strikes should be done through the aerodrome. I think that they should copy dungeon style rewards, as in you get a lucky chance for good drops, but that's counterbalanced by a token system that continues along. Raids did a similar thing, and there needs to be a big thing at the end, which I think ultimately has to be legendary, right? So your suggestion is it's just another way of getting the same legendary armor. I think that's totally doable and obviously has some merit, but I also think it's pretty lame. I think it runs out quite quickly. I don't think it appeals to a lot of veterans who are already swimming in their legendary armor, and I think there needs to be something more. Now, the next cool thing would be to say just do legendary armor again. It's just a new skin set. There's new legendary armor to earn that looks prettier or different. You know, the fundamental idea of legendary armor that morphs and looks different when you unsheath versus when you are sheathed is brilliant. But if you remember, when legendary armor came out, a lot of people just rebelled against it and said they didn't like the way it looked and blah, 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 blah. So I wonder if the studio feels like that kind of burned them to a certain degree and they don't ever want to try it again, which I think would be a huge mistake, because having different aesthetics for the legendary armor, maybe I don't want to look all crystally and glowing, maybe I want a different theme, would go a really, really long way. After that, I mean, you can think weapons. I don't really think that's necessarily appropriate. What might be good, and I still kind of believe in, even though the gem store's trampled all over it for mounts, but legendary mounts or legendary boats, maybe? I mean, legendary boats for beating the hardcore endgame is a bit iffy, but it would be something, right? Legendary mounts especially, like when I play Final Fantasy XIV and I beat some of their difficult content and I get a mount at the end, I think that's really, really cool. Guild Wars could totally have been doing something similar through the POF era. They didn't really commit to a great infrastructure of raiding and so on at that time, but with End of Dragons, it sounds like they are committing to a great infrastructure of hardcore endgame, so maybe they can finally do it. And yes, I know they already sell some really pretty looking gem store skins that are basically legendary mounts, but I say it's probably a good move nonetheless. Lastly, for this brief edition today, we've got Hawk-Eyed Magician, is that how we say it, who's reminding me and everyone else, hopefully, of something important to check out. Speaking of current events and so on, super random thing, WP, if you go back to Timey and Goric after completing the Siren's Landing return achievements, you get a dialogue that suggests someone else, unknown, has been doing dragon research, getting in their way and frustrating Timey. I immediately thought of the Canthan scientist and wondered if this is a part of how the devs want to tie that story into End of Dragons. I think it totally is. I think the mysterious stranger that appeared at the Eye of the North and all those little conversations you're seeing there, that's like the most recent writing and the most important stuff for us to be looking at. And I kind of want to dedicate a part just to the mysterious stranger alone, because what he suggests for like mist travel coming up in future storylines, it tied in with all that stuff we did on the trailer analysis, I think could really lead somewhere very, very cool. So just to remind you guys, as you do these Living World achievements, keep looking back at the Eye of the North. And, you know, maybe if there's like one more conversation in the coming weeks, there'll be enough that I can sit down and do like a playthrough of all that dialogue for you guys, and we can run through it all at once. It's just a little bit too bite-sized to do videos on at the moment, I think. Just a little bit too bite-sized. But yeah, a good thing to remind everyone of that I wanted to platform on the show here today. So give me your questions, guys. Give me your comments. Anything that's on your mind about End of Dragons in general at the moment. Any news that maybe I missed. And keep an eye out for the Skiff's coverage, this new silhouette. Any of your thoughts on any of that. I feel really really refreshed at the moment. I've had a good breather. I want to get jumping straight back in. So I'll see you guys on the next part tomorrow. Take care now.